It was inevitable that computers would become stronger at chess than humans. The question was when. In 1996, after 7 years of research and development, a team at IBM decided that they were ready to challenge the world's best chess player, Garry Kasparov, for a match. It took place in February 1996 in Philadelphia. 6 games to be played, and the first one was won by IBM's supercomputer Deep Blue. Kasparov manages to fight back and eventually wins the match 4-2. A rematch is proposed and takes place a year later in New York. And this is the match everybody remembers. The first game is won by Kasparov, but the second one tells a different story. Deep Blue wins in a style that was, according to Kasparov, a much higher level chess than it was shown in the first game, and also he felt it was a more human way of playing. This game haunts Kasparov for the rest of the match, and even though the result was 2.5 after 5 games, the last decisive game came with a shock. It is Deep Blue with the white pieces, Garry Kasparov as black, and it started out with 1e4, c6. Kasparov did not apply the Sicilian defense, his favorite opening, in any of the games with black during this match. He did so in 1996, but not in 1997. He played once e5, and in another game he pushed c6, just like in this one, and after d4 he went d6 in the other game. So this is game 6, and now after d4 he goes for the Caro-Kann defense, d5, knight c3, d takes e4, knight takes e4, and knight d7, the Karpov variation of the Caro-Kann defense. Knight g5, a very aggressive approach, immediately targeting the f7 square, bishop d3, e6, knight 1 to f3. This is all theory and all a variation that Kasparov was aware of, but somehow in this position, instead of playing the most common move, bishop to d6, normal developing move, he went for h6, when Deep Blue immediately captures on e6, sacrificing a piece, and Kasparov ends up shaking his head. There's a documentary called The Man vs. the Machine where you can relive this dramatic moment and the shock on Kasparov's face. After knight takes e6, he had to decide whether to take this piece or play queen e7. He went for the latter. F takes e6 would have led to bishop g6 check, and the king has to go to e7, blocking the bishop's way and therefore paralyzing black's camp. So it is a piece up for black, but he can barely move his pieces. The computer evaluation for this position is roughly equal, but it's certainly not a pleasant position to play, especially not against the computer. Knight takes e6, queen e7 is what happened in the game. It is also going to be the capturing of the piece either with queen e6, if white doesn't do anything, or f takes e6. The difference is that now the dA square is free for black's king. Castle, so that if queen takes e6, white can play rook e1. Ooh-oh. Therefore, castle kingside f takes e6 has to be played, and now the check. As we have said, the king has a square to go to on d8. Bishop f4 was played by Deep Blue, and here it seems that was another critical moment, another tense moment where maybe Kasparov did not play the best move, and that is b5. Of course, it's very easy to be smart in hindsight. With the help of the engine, this position is difficult. And if you need to play moves like knight to h7, which is one of the first suggestions of the engine, it just goes to show that it was extremely tough to defend this position as black. Knight h7 and queen b4 are two suggestions by the engine. But believe me, this position would have been a hell to play against Deep Blue, even if Kasparov would have played something other than b5. And that is because of what is the strength of the computer. The computer, in this case Deep Blue, using 256 processors calculating 200 million possible moves per second. 200 million possible moves per second. Compare that to our capacity of calculation. So these kind of positions is exactly what Kasparov wanted to avoid in the match, because this is where the computers were already very strong. Calculation, brute force calculation. b5 is played by Kasparov as mentioned, and the problem with this move, unfortunately, is that it helps white open up the position. With the king in the middle of the board, you know that that's what white should do. So deep blue pushes a4 immediately, after which bishop b7, rook e1, bringing the rook to the e file, knight d5, the bishop has to move, drops back to g3. Kasparov tries to hide his king, he goes to c8, tries to escape, a takes b5, opening the a file, and after c takes b5, a simple but very effective move comes, queen to d3, simply attacking this pawn and preparing for c4 in case that pawn is defended. Bishop c6, and now one option would have been to push c4 immediately, or the move by the computer, which is even stronger, bishop f5. There's a pin on the e file, he's threatening to take, rook takes e6, attacking both the queen and the bishop on c6. There isn't really a good defense, you can't protect this pawn properly, therefore Kasparov decides to sacrifice his queen. E takes f5, rook takes e7, bishop takes, and after c4, on move 19, Garry Kasparov, the world chess champion, decided to resign. Now, why does he resign? Let's look at that first. If he takes on c4, queen takes c4, the spin is more than annoying. You need to protect the bishop, knight to b4 for instance, and a simple move like rook e1, attacking the bishop that is protecting the knight that is protecting the bishop on c6, everything collapses. Rook e8, white can simply take on e7 and then capture the knight on b4. There's no real defense here. If the rook goes back to e8, queen d6 wins on the spot, attacking the bishop and threatening mate in 1. If, for instance, the rook goes to e6 to protect the d6 square, queen c4, back to the c file, threatening the rook and pushing d5, winning a piece. Let's try another move. What else can we do here? King d8, protecting the rook. But now, bishop h4, and after g5, knight takes g5. H takes, bishop takes, and the rook drops. So there is really no defense after c4. This happened on the 11th of May in 1997, a historic moment, the moment when, first time ever, a computer defeats the strongest chess player in the world. 20 years later, Garry Kasparov writes a book about this experience, and I would like to quote him, what he says in his book, Deep Thinking. I make it clear in Deep Thinking that my loss to Deep Blue was also a victory for humans, its creators, and everyone who benefits from our technological leaps. And indeed, in December 2017, a program called AlphaZero teaches itself how to play chess and defeats the strongest engine in a match. But that is a story to tell in a different episode.